With the latest escalations between Ukraine and Russia in the Black Sea, we're answering your questions about what's going on, according to Google's autocomplete. I'm Omar, and this is the 101 Ukraine conflict. Ukraine who? Who controls what? After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Ukraine gained independence in 1991, and its map looked like this. But today it looks like this, with the Ukrainian peninsula known as Crimea controversially annexed by Russia, and other areas now under Russian control. And here's why. Ukraine what? What happened? That's a good question. To explain this, first we have to delve into the makeup of the Ukrainian people and their history as a former Soviet territory. Most people who live in the center and west of the country speak Ukrainian, but as you move south and closer to the Russian border, most speak Russian and tend to have stronger ties to their former Soviet identity. This is a consequence of it being such an integral part of the former USSR, during which both Russian culture and language were at the forefront of everyday Ukrainian life. During the Cold War, the former USSR created a massive nuclear arsenal, and a lot of it was part of the then Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. Those weapons remained in the country after its independence in 1991, but Ukraine gave Russia its nukes in 1995 in return for a promise to respect Ukraine's sovereignty. Then in 2000, Russia signed a deal with the EU to once again reaffirm Ukraine's independence, saying it would allow Ukraine and any other former Soviet states to make treaties with whatever nation they wanted to. That all fell apart in 2014, when the democratically elected government of pro-Russian President Viktor Yanukovych announced that it wasn't signing a long-negotiated association agreement with the EU. The deal would give Ukraine political and financial support, but instead Yanukovych was going forward with a Russia-focused Eurasian Economic Union. Protesters flooded the streets of the capital, Kiev, and the crisis known as the Euromaidan Revolution ultimately led to Yanukovych fleeing the country, and later, of Russian military intervention in the southeast. Because in the midst of the unrest, Russia sent special forces into the Crimean Peninsula, which is strategically located dividing the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea. It was there that the majority of Ukrainians claimed Russian as their mother tongue and felt stronger ties to their eastern neighbors. In what some call a referendum at gunpoint, the people overwhelmingly voted to leave Ukraine and join Russia. The UN General Assembly, Ukraine, along with many world leaders, rejected the vote, citing many international agreements where Russia had pledged to uphold the geographic integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine. But Russian President Vladimir Putin defended the move as complying with the will of the people. And now there's been trouble in the Black Sea, and again, geography is really important here. Since the annexation of Crimea, Russia has claimed control of both sides of the Kerch Strait, which is the only waterway connecting the Sea of Azov to the Black Sea. They've built a bridge connecting the two sides. Ukraine and Russia have had an agreement going back to 2003 that allows both countries to use the waterway. But on November 24th, Ukraine said it sent 2 gunboats and a tug from its Black Sea port of Odessa to its port in the Sea of Azov. And on the way, Russia says Ukraine illegally breached its territorial waters. And after the Ukrainian ships had turned away and were heading back to the open waters of the Black Sea, a Russian ship rammed the tug, jets were scrambled, and the Ukrainian vessels were fired upon. Russia then seized the ships and their crew. More than 10,000 people have been killed in eastern Ukraine by Russia-backed separatists since mid-2014. And this latest escalation is raising fears that the conflict between the former Soviet state and its prior head are heading towards an all-out war. Ukraine where? Where is it situated? The geographic location of Ukraine is very important to both Europe and Russia. If Ukraine leans more Eurocentric, that puts European and NATO influence right on another one of Russia's borders. And if it allies with Russia, that brings Moscow's influence deeper into European territory, also threatening NATO. Since the 2014 crisis, Ukraine seems to be set on strengthening ties with Europe. And with it joining the deep and comprehensive free trade areas in 2016, the whole country, minus Crimea, which EU considers illegally annexed, has access to parts of the EU's single market, allowing goods and people to travel freely and making them less dependent on Russia. Ukraine when? When did it start? Disagreements between Russia and Ukraine began early into the former Soviet state's history. There was the nuclear issue, but that was not all. From 1993 to 2010, there were several gas disputes between the two nations. You see, Russia actually supplies the EU with about a quarter of its natural gas, and about 80% of that travels through Ukraine. Ukraine was accused of skimming gas in order to feed its domestic needs, and that wasn't appreciated by Russia or the EU. As a result, gas running through the country was in part or completely cut off at the source several times over the years. And starting sometime in 2019, Russia plans to bypass Ukraine entirely by supplying Europe through the Turkish Stream gas pipeline project.